Hi there. Welcome to another edition of Counterpunch with Trevor Loudon, the show that exposes the unfolding world communist revolution. Please like the show, share the show, tell your friends about it. You will see information here you will not see anywhere else. Well, today, this was for my friends in Georgia, the great state of Georgia, USA. But really, the implication of what's happening in Georgia will be felt across the nation and really across the world. So there's a big US Senate election coming up in Georgia, and the balance of the US Senate is hanging right there. How this election goes could determine who controls the Senate for the next 2 years going forward. It could determine the survival of this nation. So the race is between Herschel Walker, a former football player, a conservative, sort of new to politics, a good man. His opposition is the incumbent senator, Reverend Raphael Warnock, who I believe is a Marxist sympathizer. So why do I call Raphael Warnock a Marxist or even a communist sympathizer? Because that's who he hangs around with. He has his entire life from his teenage years right up to the present day. He's worked their programs. He's hung around with their people. He adopts their philosophies. He promotes their legislation. He is very much on the hard left. But he's got a lot of people fooled because, after all, he is a reverend. Well, anybody who's watched my movie Enemies Within the Church will know that there are lots of Marxists in the Christian churches. So where do I start with Raphael Warnock? He had, in his early days as a young man, brought up in Georgia, in Savannah, but most of his education took place up north in New York with the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem, a very famous church, and at Union Theological Seminary. He had two mentors really at that time. The first one was Reverend Calvin Butts, the lead pastor, the head of the Abyssinian Baptist Church. Now, Raphael Warnock trained under Butts. He was a youth pastor, then a pastor. The two remained very, very close. They go to each other's events. Butts has endorsed one of Raphael Warnock's books. There's very much a mentor-protege relationship between the two men. But Calvin Butts has always been a Marxist, a very deep radical. Back in 1968, before he went into the church, he was a young black radical in Atlanta, Georgia, working with a group called Pride, a black radical organization. Now, the night that Martin Luther King was assassinated was a big night in Atlanta. You know, the black radicals, Calvin Butts and his friends were hanging around. They were watching the Western movie Shane, and they heard that Martin Luther King had been shot, and they were deeply shocked. And then they heard he had died, and they went into action. Calvin Butts and his friends went and released their stash of Molotov cocktails. They had Molotov cocktails all ready for violence. They took those Molotov cocktails out and they burnt down several stores that night. They tried to burn down a church, but luckily people saved it in time. They also went out there and terrorized white passengers in cars. This is Calvin Butts, in his own words, admitting what he did. Reverend Warnock's other youthful mentor was Professor James Cone of Union Theological Seminary. Now, like Malcolm X, James Cone compared the white man with the devil. He was a Marxist, very, very close to Democratic Socialists of America. He attended many of their events. They sold his books in their bookstore, including the classic, The Black Church and Marxism. What do they have to say to each other? Cone was one of the founders of Black liberation theology. This was modeled on the liberation theology of Latin America. The Soviet KGB were not making much headway in Latin America because the Catholic Church was too strong. So they put a Catholic veneer on Marxism and used that to take over several countries in Latin America. In the United States, they used a similar philosophy. They brought Marxism into the black churches and told people it was Christianity. On moving back to Georgia, Raphael Warnock started working with the local Marxists. Georgia, in common with much of the South, had a deep Marxist networks that had come south to work in the civil rights movement and stayed. And they were Maoists, they were Communist Party USA people, they were League of Revolutionary Struggle and Line of March and Communist Workers' Party and October League and all of these organizations. Warnock was very close and still is very close to a Georgia state senator named Nan Warnock. She was once a member of the pro-Chinese October League, which became the Communist Party USA Marxist-Leninist, which was for a while China's official American franchise. Now, Nan Warnock is very close to DSA, Democratic Socialist of America. She goes to their meetings on a regular basis. Here is a picture of Raphael Warnock from about 2015 with Nan Warnock and Julian Bond, a veteran of the Southern Civil Rights Movement and a long-time Democratic Socialist of America comrade. Another big fan of Raphael Warnock is Renita Shannon. She's a Georgia state representative, very, very admiring of Warnock, very helpful to Warnock, and also very, very close to Democratic Socialists of America. About 2014, Raphael Warnock hooked up with the Moral Mondays movement. That was led by Reverend William Barber out of North Carolina. Massive left-wing protests in North Carolina. They spread to Georgia, Kentucky, Indiana, and Raphael Warnock was very heavily involved in the movement in Georgia. At one point, he was arrested in a Moral Mondays protest against I think to do with Medicare. They invaded the office of the then Republican governor of Georgia, and they all got arrested. Now, arrested that day in that office with Warnock were several DSA comrades, including Daniel Hanley, Tim Franzen, Misty Novich, Minnie Ruffin, and Ray Mickelthun. You'll be surprised to learn that the other Georgia Senator, Jon Ossoff, was also backed by similar forces. He's white, but the important thing was winning the Senate, because you got to win the Senate to allow Joe Biden to push through the Marxist agenda. And Jon Ossoff was backed heavily by Democratic Socialists of America. The first thing he did when he was elected was to ask President Biden to appoint a man called Daniel Blackman to the head of the Environmental Protection Agency in the Southeast. I'm talking Georgia, the Carolinas, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida. Massively powerful position in a very socialist agency, while Daniel Blackman is a card-carrying member of Democratic Socialists of America. He's a Marxist, and now he's in that position because of Jon Ossoff. Now, this is all outlined and much, much more in my two books, Security Risk Senators, Part 1 and Part 2. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them through my website, trevorloudon.com. I've got 40 pages on Warnock. I've got 30 pages on Ossoff, plus another 28 currently serving US senators who are working with Iran and China and Cuba and the Communist Party and Democratic Socialists of America and other enemies of America. This is a critical election. Last time, a lot of Georgia conservatives sat out the election because Mitch McConnell came into the state, said there was no vote fraud, the Senate seats were lost because of Trump, and when they came up for re-election, when the race was held, a lot of Georgia conservatives stayed home in disgust. Well, that's led to some pretty dire situations in America today. We're on the verge of communism in this country because of that election. We have to make sure that one of those seats, Warnock's seat, is taken back in November the 8th. The fate of the country depends on this, and not just the country either, the Western world. If you think I'm exaggerating, maybe watch some of my previous shows. We're in a very dire situation. So thanks very much for watching. Thanks for taking the time to learn more about what's happening in your country and what you can do to fix it. Please like the show, share the show, and watch the show in the future. So thanks very much for watching. God bless America, and God bless the great state of Georgia, and God bless everybody who loves liberty. Thank you.